Hey everyone, you might be aware that for the past 4 years, TREW Marketing has partnered with GlobalSpec to produce research on how engineers seek and consume information to make purchase decisions. Well, on today's show, we'll be highlighting our 2021 State of Marketing to Engineers Research Report findings. It's a great year to dive into this report because we have a lot of implications of COVID on how engineers' behavior changed and what to expect as we go through this year, as we're not exactly business as usual, are we? So you can find the report on our TREW Marketing website in the resources section. We also have a webinar on the report, but today we'll be walking through some of those findings and just discussing what it means to us and what the future of the report may hold. Let's do this.
Welcome to Content Marketing Engineered, your source for building trust and generating demand with technical content. Here is your host, Wendy Covey.
Hi, and welcome to Content Marketing Engineered. On each episode, I'll break down an industry trend, challenge, or best practice in reaching technical audiences. You'll meet colleagues, friends, and clients of mine who will stop by to share their stories. And I hope that you leave each episode feeling inspired and ready to take action. Before we jump in, I'd like to give a brief shout out to my agency, TREW Marketing. TREW is a full-service agency located in beautiful Austin, Texas, serving highly technical companies. For more information, visit trewmarketing.com. And now on with our podcast. Hey everyone. Well, today I'm joined by Jenn Corcoran. She's the marketing director at GlobalSpec. Hi, Jenn.
Hi, Wendy. It's so nice to be here.
I feel like I've been seeing you quite a bit lately.
I know, we're lucky.
So exactly. So Jenn and I worked very closely together to recently launch the 2021 State of Marketing to Engineers Research Report. And so today I've invited her on so we can talk all about it and share some interesting findings with you.
Yeah, I'm excited.
So before we jump in, Jenn, little known fact about you. Before you joined GlobalSpec, you were once a columnist and a political correspondent in Costa Rica.
Yes.
For the Costa Rican news. Wow. Okay. So let's back up. Okay. Born and raised in New York?
No, I was born and raised in Vermont, in a small town. I went to college in New York, and there I studied abroad in Costa Rica.
So there it is.
Yes. So after I graduated, I moved back to Costa Rica for a year and a half. And that's where I kind of got into writing for the Costa Rican news. And I taught English when I was there as well.
Very cool. And was that in the San Jose area, or were you far
I live
flung?
in San Jose. It's pretty much the only city in Costa Rica. So it's the only place with any kind of infrastructure. And then you can get to all the beaches from there very easily.
Very easily. Well, I've spent quite a bit of time on all the beaches in Costa Rica, mainly on the far Pacific coast on the peninsula. So we've been all the way north and all the way south to the Malpais, Santa Teresa area, if you're familiar with that.
Oh,
so,
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
nice.
Loved
a little bit of that right now.
Yeah, I think we all could get out of this winter weather and go hop on a four-wheeler and go to the beach. Heck yeah.
A little bit.
All right. Well, after we're done with this interview, let's get to planning. Well, tell our listeners a little bit about GlobalSpec, those that aren't familiar with you.
Yeah, for sure. So at GlobalSpec, we provide solutions, data-driven solutions for industrial marketers to help them promote their products and grow their business, because our audience is made up of engineers and technical professionals that come to GlobalSpec as a trusted source of content for news, community, webinars, and all sorts of videos. So they're looking to find products and services through all stages of their purchasing process.
So big educational resource. And I know that this isn't the only, it's probably the best research report you do all year because it's with TREW Marketing, but not the only one, right?
No. So yeah, we really pride ourselves on providing lots of research to our audience of industrial marketers. We also do another kind of longstanding research report called The Pulse of Engineering, which we'll be releasing soon. We also study our industrial marketers. So we release trends in industrial marketing, digital media use, social media use. And we're kind of always kind of popping up surveys and information here and there as the time goes on. We recently did one on supply chain because we know many of our customers are facing supply chain issues, and we wanted to know how that's affecting them. So things like that.
Well, I find this original research data so important, particularly when working with technical audiences, because there's often a low get it factor on what marketing is all about and what works. And, the B2B data, what it shows doesn't always trend, or many times really doesn't trend when it comes to the technical buyers. So when I co-founded TREW Marketing back 13 years ago, that was one of the first things we thought, wow, we really need some data that focuses in this audience. So
yeah, absolutely.
Such valuable information. So can't wait to reveal some of what we found in this year's report, because it was a really unique one, obviously, with COVID. So tell me a little bit about the focus of this year's research.
Yeah, sure. So if I'm correct, this is our 4th year doing the research.
4 years.
Yeah. And we kind of always have the same underlying focus, which is, basically just to understand how engineers and technical buyers are finding information and how that helps them make technical decisions. So that's kind of always the current that runs through, what we're doing. This year, we knew that it was important to add some questions about kind of reflecting what's happening in our world with the COVID-19 pandemic. So we added questions a lot about virtual events. We know that that's something that engineers kind of used to rely on trade shows for a lot of information. Our research has told us that. So, now that they're, forced to be consuming this information at home, were they consuming it, and did they find value in it? And then also trending on kind of the stay-at-home side of things is podcasting. So, we asked them about podcasts and if they listen to them and how they find value in them as well.
Well, I can't wait to reveal some of those answers. But before we do, this year was also significant because we had a record number of surveys completed. I mean, I was blown away. So how many engineers filled out our survey, Jen?
Almost 1,400. I think we were at 1,380 something.
Amazing. So in a lot of surveys, to give perspective, the end sample might be 200 or, 350 or 500. So to have a number this large is just so statistically irrelevant, all these answers. And so it was fun too, to see data that's trended year after year after year, and now just validated not only with the number of years that we've asked questions, but the number of people this year.
Sure.
So
yeah,
really cool. Well, let's dive in, and we'll start with virtual events and webinars. So what were some of the key findings in that area?
Well, so we did find that over half of engineers had attended, virtual events. I think it was at like 52% had. And those that did, like, overwhelmingly found it valuable. 80% said yes. What I really found interesting was that engineers still do say they prefer webinars by a slight margin. And, you and I talked about why might that be. And I think one thing that I've learned over the years in researching engineers, if you will, is that they are slow to they're skeptical in nature. So I was not surprised to see that they weren't all of a sudden, oh my God, virtual events are my new favorite thing.
Right. I'm sure to be just like what it's like in person.
Yeah, exactly. This is fun. This is great. So, they were kind of not sure what they preferred.
Yeah.
And you and I had kind of talked about why might that be. One reason is because virtual events are kind of a new thing. It's funny. GlobalSpec years and years ago, we actually used to do virtual events, and they kind of petered out a little bit as technology has evolved. So it's funny to see that they're back kind of by necessity more than anything else. But as I was saying, they, one, are not used to virtual events. And two, I think it might be hard for some of them to distinguish a large difference between virtual events and webinars.
Yeah, I feel that's a big one too. A lot of market confusion.
Yeah. So, I think if you are an industrial marketer and you're reading this and you're thinking, should I kind of invest in virtual events or should I stick to webinars? What should I do? I really think, and I think that you would agree that the format doesn't matter as much as what kind of content you're presenting, and that's the end all and be all of, you should be putting out something relevant and informative. I would definitely look at an event and make sure that it's put together well and easy to navigate. I don't think engineers care so much about bells and whistles and virtual exhibit halls and stuff, but if the content is there, then I think that's what matters above all.
Absolutely. You're spot on. And I recently presented our research to the American Marketing Association.
Yeah.
And it was, it was a small group, so we were able to make it really interactive. And so I asked, hey, who of you participated in a virtual event in 2020 and how did it go? And the experience mirrored what we were thinking. So people that went to one that was sort of like a trade show on your screen, where you had like pushy chat windows for sales and just a bunch of downloadable brochures, had a really terrible experience. And then those that had that webinar educational component had a great experience. So it totally aligned with what you just said.
Yeah, that's good to have some kind of anecdotal evidence to back up like what the numbers say.
Yeah. Well, how about video? I know this is, I think was our second year to dive into video as a source of content and information.
Yeah, sure. So I think it's important to kind of, first of all, distinguish. I think that a lot of times when we talk about video or when we talk about video in a B2B context, it has this millennial air around it that
sure does.
We need to make videos for the millennials or, the younger engineers. And, what we're really seeing is that that's not true, that engineers of all ages and at all experience levels are consuming video. I found that 96% of engineers watch videos for work in the work that they're doing, which is creeping up. Last year it was 93%. So, eventually we might get to 100%.
Yeah, I mean, 96% is pretty darn close.
Oh yeah, it's virtually everyone.
Yeah.
So, in considering that this year our sample size did skew a bit older, it does really say that no matter how old an engineer is or how veteran they are in the industry, they are watching videos specifically about their work.
Yeah. I recently had a guest on this podcast named Brian Fitton, and his company produces B2B videos. And we talked a lot about why marketers don't lean into this type of content. Like what is so intimidating about it? Mm-hmm. And I think there's also this perception that, think of that really slick corporate video that's professionally produced and has drones flying in and all that stuff. And I think marketers think that that's what video has to look like.
Sure,
but in reality, when you look at how many engineers utilize YouTube and you combine that with looking at video, it's not about slick quality.
Right.
It's about learning on a topic. And
yeah, absolutely. And, I think that it's hard sometimes as a marketer to disengage from what you might like to see in a video. As marketers, we're definitely some people that pay attention to graphics and music and branding. And, while obviously we want our videos to look professional, engineers far and away just prefer, it could be a teardown or a how-to video or a demo video. And, especially in this day and age, you can kind of work with what you got to get that content out there.
Yeah. And I'll tell you on LinkedIn, when you share video, a short video snippet versus a flat image or text performs much better. So that alone is a reason to lean in so you can jack up your engagement on social.
That's a great point.
Yeah. Well, podcasting was a new topic for us to explore this year. And as a person who just started a podcast in the beginning of 2020, I was so interested to see, okay, do engineers actually use this source? Or I know marketers do,
Right.
because I've done really well at having more and more subscribers as the months went on. But what did engineers say about podcast, Jen?
Yeah. So I also found this very interesting. Overall, I would say that podcasts are still emerging as a content type for engineers. We found that slightly over half of them, 55%, listen to podcasts in the context of their work. So, we found that about that same amount actually subscribe to shows, while 48%, they might listen, but they don't have subscriptions. And we found that the average engineer is listening to what equates to about one episode per week, because you figure an episode is 15 to 30 minutes long, and what they're showing us is that's about what they listen to per week.
Yeah. So what's your prediction? Do you think this number will change next year?
I think so. I think it will go up. We definitely, we saw this with video when we first started years ago asking about video. I think that engineers were watching videos, but maybe not as much in the context of their work. Mm-hmm. And I think this is what we're seeing here too. Podcasts are slowly coming more ubiquitous in our general lives.
Yeah.
So it's only a matter of time before engineers in larger amounts start to turn to those for work as well.
Yeah. And of course, you're seeing a proliferation of options of podcast shows. So maybe that is part of the lag too, is the content just wasn't being produced, and perhaps it will be this year. So yeah.
Yeah, it's not too late to get in on the podcast game for sure.
Well, one of the more, I guess, surprising, or dare I say, maybe even controversial topics is around social media.
This is always so interesting to me.
I know.
Once again, just kind of like underscores the difference in marketers and engineers. But I think that something that we have said for a while is that engineers are on social media, they're consuming social media, but it is not where they go to get valuable technical information. And, that makes a lot of sense, right? If you're trying to figure out where to source a part, or if you're trying to learn more about how a certain part works, Facebook is maybe not your go-to.
No.
But we did see an interesting shift in, we found almost half of engineers found like professional community networks valuable. And that's something that we hadn't really seen a big interest in the past. But I think, this year, with not being able to travel and not being able to kind of gather for those networking events, the online version of those networks has become a lot more important.
Yeah. And I know that every year we get the question, what is a professional network? Like, what do you mean by that? And so to qualify, and we've even, I know in our questions, given examples. So associations, or really any type of like-minded group. So there's a site called Stack Overflow, and there's Quora. So there's community sourced places where people are sharing code or sharing technical information. And those are the types of professional networks that we see engineers gravitating towards.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So out of the more popular social channels, of course, the number one was LinkedIn, and has been LinkedIn for many years. So how are engineers utilizing LinkedIn?
That is a great question. I think they're spending the majority of their time on LinkedIn kind of searching for contacts and relevant people to connect with, whether that be other engineers or, people to source products and information from. They are consuming content most often on LinkedIn. So, you might have the best luck kind of gaining followers on LinkedIn as opposed to Facebook or Twitter or Instagram. So if I know that we at GlobalSpec have a lot of success reaching out to people through LinkedIn and through our pages on LinkedIn. So I would definitely, if you're trying to kind of whittle down where to place your efforts, LinkedIn is certainly a place that you should look. However, I think that while we see that, only 5% of people find Facebook very valuable, a lot of engineers find it somewhat valuable. So, they might still find that interesting, video snippets and stuff like that on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram.
Yeah. Well, with TREW Marketing clients, we've found the most success when it comes to Facebook, utilizing that to show your company culture, using it as a recruiting forum. And then with LinkedIn, trends are something that tends to be popular. So with both advertising placements and just regular posts, talking about industry trends, how to solve a particular problem. But like you said, they're not going there to source a part. So I think that example stuck with me. So it's really more about high level education, what's happening in the industry, and definitely connect with people as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important, what we kind of always say is that even if an engineer is not going to Facebook to solve a problem for their work, they probably are going to Facebook on their leisure time, right? So if you can expose yourself to them, even when they're not expressly looking for you, you will gain brand awareness through that.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good. Well, just to let you know, and our listeners know, in the month of March, I'm running a LinkedIn mini series. So every single episode is going to be on LinkedIn, and I'm excited. I've recorded some of the interviews and some are upcoming, but we'll be examining it from experts in advertising on LinkedIn, selling on LinkedIn, creating content for LinkedIn, and then we'll have some case studies of industrial marketers and what they're finding success at on LinkedIn. So
that's awesome. I'm excited for that.
Yeah. So we'll be releasing 2 a week in March. So it's pretty aggressive. I've been very busy. I don't want to give up all the secrets now, but there's some really cool ideas and innovative things people are doing. So anyway, little plug for that in March.
Awesome.
Yeah. Well, speaking of innovation, one of the things that marketers have done that's somewhat innovative is retargeting. So creating personalized ads, right, based on someone's browsing history. And we decided to add this to our research, but of course we had to kind of explain to an engineer what it is because they don't know the word retargeting. So how did that go?
Yeah, so I was fascinated by the results to this question. I think as a marketer, retargeting is something that we are used to and we recognize. If I see an advertisement and I know that I've been to that website, I can understand, why I was served that. But engineers are pretty split on how they feel about it, honestly. The top response at 30% was that they're creeped out by it and they can believe that a vendor is following them around the internet. Another 27% claim that they take no real notice about my advertisement. So they're not creeped out because they're just not engaging. But, then you do have 26% that claim that it does heighten their awareness of the product and makes them kind of recall, oh yeah, I remember that I looked at that. And then another 18% kind of say that it serves as a reminder to go back and either evaluate or purchase the product. And then they claim that they would revisit the page.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I guess the answer is be cautious, marketers, be cautious. And look at the data, right? Because every audience is a little bit different. So.
Sure. Yeah. And I think that, this would be a really good slide or, if you have the report, to share that page of the report with your sales team, because I think that sometimes they can be a little bit too over eager to kind of reveal any kind of tracking that's been going on.
Yeah, right.
So to kind of tread lightly when kind of calling out that you are aware of their search history.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Well, I know we also had some questions on the sales process, which we do every year because, it's always interesting to see how long engineers search online and try to find their own answers before they're willing to engage with sales. And that number is consistently trended 50% or better, and it keeps going up and up and up. And certainly some age differences in this question too.
Yeah. So, I would say that it might be easy to think that, the pandemic has kind of made people go online for their buying process, but that's really always been the trend. So it may have, pushed it a little bit, but it's not the sole reason here. Engineers have moved online to complete much of the buying process, and they have for a while now. We saw 62% of respondents complete more than half of the buying process online before they reach out to anyone. And we see, we do see that there are differences in age, but it might not be what you think. So engineers that are 45 and under do spend even more time online. 70% of those people complete more than half the buying process online. I know there's a lot of numbers flying out here. Sometimes it can be hard to follow along, but engineers 45 and under are spending the most time online before reaching out to someone. But still, when we look at, for example, engineers over 65, they're also spending at least 50% of the journey online. So it's not as egregious in the differences as you might think.
Yep. Good point.
And that's just really kind of the way of the world these days.
It is. I was speaking with an engineer last week who shared that, oh yeah, I don't want to talk to anyone. No, like, don't call me. I don't want to talk to anyone. And so I said, okay. I said, well, let me tell you, we also ask when an engineer is ready to talk to sales, what form do they want to communicate in?
Sure.
And overwhelmingly it was
email. It was email. We found, 52% would prefer to contact someone via email. We found 29% would prefer a phone call. And then, not very many people were in favor of in-person meetings for obvious reasons. We also saw, I know we get a lot of questions about online chat.
We sure do.
And it's the preferred method for only 5% of engineers. It doesn't mean they're not using it to maybe ask one-off questions or, ask for a phone number or ask for an email address. So I wouldn't say that online chat is not utilized. It's just maybe not what you would think of as your preferred method to really dive into things.
Yeah. And it really dive into things. I think that's a good way to say it. With this same engineer, I said, well, hey, what about chat? And he was like, chat? No. And I said, okay, well, why? Because I feel like we use it so much in B2C situations that they're kind of, I joke, beating us into submission, right? We're just going to be so used to it. And he made a good point that no, often this is a highly technical solution. I'm going to need a lot of information, some resources that I can go, link to, reference, whatever. And that's way easier to do via email. You can go into a little bit more detail. You can provide links, provide documents, but I still don't have to talk to anybody that I perceive is trying to push something on me. So it was interesting to hear from his perspective why email is so valued. And, I think a lot of disappointment on the marketer's part because we're trying to, how can we push people further in the funnel? How can we better qualify these leads for sales? So I get why chat is favored, but boy, I guess most of these engineers just aren't ready when it comes to at least seeking a technical solution. So
sure, absolutely.
Yeah, maybe it's better customer service or other things.
Definitely.
Let's see. Yeah. Well, I guess taking a step back and reflecting on this year's report, previous years, like you said, we've done this for 4 years now. So what are some of the things that you've found consistent year after year?
Yeah. And I think, I do think it's a little bit comforting to look at this data and see that, despite the year we had in 2020 and, where things are going is still uncertain this year, some things don't change. When we talk about overall, engineers are hungry for content. They find a lot of different types of content very valuable, such as, white papers and CAD drawings. They are wanting to download white papers and all sorts of information as much as possible. The rise in video is steady and expected for us. So I would expect that to continue. And also something that we haven't really touched on today is e-newsletters. Engineers engage a lot with e-newsletters. They find the content in those e-newsletters valuable. They usually subscribe to multiple newsletters. And, we have a good percentage of engineers that say that they read all the e-newsletters that they get. And then we also have a large percentage that kind of scan for interesting subject lines, interesting article titles, and kind of go from there.
I'm really glad you brought up e-newsletters because, while chat and podcasting are like shiny new objects that marketers like to innovate towards shiny new objects, but that is tried and true and continues to be so popular. So keep it up on your e-newsletters and consider industry e-newsletters. I know there are sponsorship opportunities with industry publications and even GlobalSpec. You guys offer that as well, I believe.
Yeah, we have over 80 newsletters at this point now.
Wow.
I know. And they're all a whole range of topics. So regardless of what industry you're in, we've got a good subscriber base somewhere.
Yeah. So if anybody knows whether or not e-newsletters are working, it's you, Jen.
Exactly.
And obviously with that many, it's working.
Yeah. And it maybe kind of goes back to kind of engaging on their own terms, right?
Yeah.
An e-newsletter can show up in your inbox, and when you have a second, you can take a look at it. You don't have to, while they do find webinars and videos and different things like that valuable, those are kind of take up more of their brain power, right? And more of their engagement, where an e-newsletter is easy for them to click on when they have a chance.
Yeah. And I always like to look at e-newsletters as a way to amplify those pieces of content that are already created. So that webinar on demand and the last 3 podcasts that someone produced, or the new video, or whatever it is, that's the vehicle to promote that content. And then it becomes an easier thing to produce every month or every quarter with these existing content assets.
Yeah, it was absolutely.
Yeah. Well, so I know we talked about a lot of the new questions that were in research this year. Were there any other big changes that surprised you, or pretty much steady as you go?
I think the new questions were really interesting to look at. When you look at some of our perennial questions, I did notice that white papers jumped up kind of in the list of most valuable pieces of content. So that's interesting to know, and it's kind of encouraging. I know that we spend a lot of time making white papers, and we encourage, our audience of industrial marketers. That's a big piece of their kind of bread and butter content marketing. So that's working. Engineers find them very valuable. And I also thought it was interesting, along with the community networks, the professional networks, we saw a little bit of a jump in trade publications. Which I found very interesting, because for years they were kind of lagging in the middle of what kind of engineers found valuable. And I think this year, without being able to travel to a trade show, they're maybe looking at those publications to get some of that same information.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see, depending on what happens this year, if those publications, continue to be seen as valuable, or if they're able to find that information in other places.
Yeah. Yeah. I know you and I are so close to this research, and so sometimes we'll just change things slightly, like add one more response area or take one away. And I just remembered one that we added, which was on video tutorials as content source. And that ended up being one of the high valued sources. So it wasn't, I think it was number 5 or maybe number 6, but it was up there in that top echelon. So didn't want to forget that.
Yeah, no, that's true. And I think we usually talk about video separately from other types of content pieces. So it's interesting to see kind of where it fits in with the rest of the things.
Yeah. So as we look forward to our next research, which we released 2022, where do you think we should focus? What do you think we should add or change? You have any ideas yet?
That's a great question. I think I'm always so interested in kind of similar to community networks, but kind of forums and where engineers, especially now, are connecting with each other. Something that we know at GlobalSpec is that engineers find their colleagues and their community to be great sources of information. That's how a lot of information on products spreads is via word of mouth. So I'm so curious to know, maybe now that some engineers are still working independently and they're not in the office. How are they getting that information, or is it something that is a need for them?
I love that. And maybe we even dare have a fill in the blank where they tell us their favorite community network, so that we have some actual, other examples for people.
Yeah.
I would also be interested to dig in, and I guess it depends on what happens this year, but I know sales organizations are really struggling with what the future should look like. Are people going to want to have in-person sales meetings, or are people going to be more working from home even after everyone has their vaccination? And so what does sales look like in the future? And if it is more virtual, what are people's preferences? Having the cameras on or off, duration, ways to engage. So that might be another one to dig into a little bit as well.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see, all the things that we were forced to pivot to in 2020, which of those things will prove to be valuable and preferred, and which of those things are we kind of eager to get rid of?
Yeah, right. Exactly. Oh, well, we invite those of you listening and watching, we invite you to tell us what your ideas on what we should study next year. So if they want to send ideas to you, Jenn, how can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am on LinkedIn. You can search Jenn Corcoran, GlobalSpec, and you'll find me. You can also contact us, on the GlobalSpec website, globalspec.com or globalspec.com/advertising. Will get you to me. And you can always also comment on our blog, which is the Marketing Maven. It's marketingmaven.globalspec.com. So there's tons of good resources there. And, just like with this survey, any kind of industrial marketing questions, ideas that you have that we could dive into, I'm all ears.
And if a company is looking to conduct their own research study, is that a service that GlobalSpec offers?
Yes, we do. We do have a survey product. So that's definitely something that they could look into.
Right after our webinar, someone asked me that, and I've been meaning to ask you. So sorry to put you on the spot there. I'm glad you said yes, because it would have been weird, but I wasn't sure. Oh, good. Well, and then also, of course, you can, those of you can also reach me on LinkedIn, but Jenn is not that easy to find on LinkedIn. So I want to spell this out. So she's Jenn.
Yes.
And then Corcoran is spelled Corcoran. And I had to look at my notes because I constantly try to put an H in there somewhere. I don't know.
Oh, yes. Very common.
Oh, Jenn, thank you so much for being on the show today. Do you have any just last one piece of parting advice for marketers in 2021?
Yeah, I think we spent all of last year being agile and being flexible and pivoting. And I think maybe some people are a little shell-shocked about that. And, we're going into 2021 and we still don't know what the end of the year might look for us, even though I think we're starting to see a light at the end of the tunnel. I think a lot of people are starting to see budgets come back and movement come back. And I would just kind of advise people, while you're being optimistic, make sure you kind of have that backup plan in your back pocket, and if we learned anything, it's how to be flexible. So, keep that skill going into 2021 and 22 and beyond. Nothing is set in stone.
Perfect. Oh, couldn't agree more. Well, thank you so much, Jenn.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining me today on Content Marketing Engineered. For show notes, including links to resources, visit TREWmarketing.com/podcast. While there, you can subscribe to our blog and our newsletter and order a copy of my book, Content Marketing Engineered. Also, I would love your reviews on this podcast. So please, when you get a chance, subscribe and leave me your review on your favorite podcast subscription platform. Thanks and have a great day.